Hey, good morning, Choice Residential. Hope your day is off to a great start. So, today I want to talk about the non exclusive buyer agency agreement. This is Form 203. And again, this is one of the forms you can use to meet the terms of the settlement, which requires you to have a written agreement with the buyer before showing them a property. Now, this may be a form that many of you are not very familiar with, as you may have gone your entire real estate career without ever using it and probably without ever actually reading or looking at it. So, I want to touch on a few important points here as we look at how to utilize this form. It stands to reason that this is a form you might use when engaging with a potential client who you maybe haven't built a lot of rapport with yet. This could be someone you meet at an open house and you're going to go show them some homes after the open house. Maybe it was a sign call on a listing and your listing didn't work out for them, but you want to go show them some other properties. Or it could be an internet lead that wants to see a property that isn't your listing. So when you haven't developed that rapport yet, this form allows you to create an agency relationship without obligating the buyer to actually pay your commission. So let's go ahead and go through the form real quick on some important points. First, here in paragraph 1, you can see you can either select a general locating of suitable real estate. So this means you can just help them find, go look at multiple properties, or you could actually make this agreement specific just to one single property. Now, this might work if it's an internet lead, for example, and they want to go see 123 Main Street, and you don't want to overwhelm them with paperwork or a commitment to work with you. You want to try to naturally develop that rapport. You could simply fill this form out just for 123 Main Street and have them sign it before actually entering the property to go view it. Now, of course, you have a duration of agency, but I want to get down to paragraph 3. And this first sentence is very important. And I would suggest that you have this form physically with with you when you go meet that prospect at the property you're going to show them. In this example of an internet lead, for example. And I would actually highlight this first sentence, which says this agreement does not obligate buyer to pay a brokerage fee or assure the payment of a brokerage fee to firm. So it's important that they understand that you are simply meeting a national federal requirement, which every agent in every state has to abide by, which is to have the buyer sign a written agreement before entering and touring a property. So it's a national rule that you are abiding by. But by signing this form, they are simply disclosing right here that the fee that your firm is going to seek is blank. Could be a percentage, could be a flat fee, whatever it is that you would typically put into your buyer agency agreements. Maybe it's 2.5% or 2.4% or 3% or some other version of how you intend to be compensated for your services and what the firm's fee will be. You would insert that here. And this is just simply disclosing to the buyer that you will seek that fee in connection with working with this buyer if they decide to make an offer. But the buyer is in no way obligated to actually pay you that commission. That is different from Form 201, the exclusive buyer agency agreement, which does in fact obligate the buyer to pay that compensation that you list in that agreement. With the non-exclusive form, it does not obligate the buyer to pay that fee. Now, a next logical question will be, okay, Brian, but what happens if no compensation is being offered or compensation that is less than what I put in this agreement is being offered? How do we handle that? Well, if you continue down to the next section of this modification of fee says that if the compensation that is in this agreement cannot be received from the seller or listing agent, then the buyer and firm, we agree to see if we can come up with a modification of this fee, right? If the buyer says, well, I'm not willing to pay you 2.5%, but I'm willing to pay you 1.5%. Well, then you as the agent can decide, is that acceptable? And do you want to modify this agreement and move forward? But if your full compensation cannot be received from the other side, then agent has the unilateral right to terminate this agreement. So if you look at the last phrase here under paragraph 3B, the modification of fee, if unable to reach such a modification, firm may unilaterally terminate this agreement. And that's important because it means if you're not getting paid anything or not getting paid what you said the fee was for your services, you don't have to continue working with that buyer. You can unilaterally terminate this agreement and just let that buyer proceed however they see fit. Again, this is very different from the exclusive buyer agency agreement, where as long as the fee that you put in the agreement is earned, is received either from the other side, and if not from the other side, your buyer has to pay you, you have to move forward. That's what, in terms of representing the buyer, that's what prevents you in the exclusive buyer agency agreement from putting something like $1, because the buyer will just pay you that $1. And if there's no compensation being offered from the other side, you now still have your fiduciary responsibility to represent that buyer's best interests, even though you're only going to receive $1. So this non-exclusive form, it protects the buyer in that they're not obligated to pay you the fee, but it protects the agent as well in that they can unilaterally terminate the agreement if the fee is not being received. Now, this is, as I said, a good form to use as an introduction to the relationship that you're going to have with a prospective buyer. But at whatever point you have built the rapport, you are going to want to migrate them to Form 201, the exclusive agency agreement, because at some point you do want the buyer to be on the hook to pay you your compensation if you can't get it from the other side. You don't want to put yourself in a position where you show houses for 6 months under this non-exclusive agreement, only to have the buyer want to make an offer on a property where no compensation is being offered and they are unwilling to negotiate that, and then the buyer is not willing to pay you. Yes, you can terminate the agreement and let the buyer move on without you, but you've just shown property for the previous 6 months and have nothing to show for it. So this isn't a form that you want to work with a buyer on in perpetuity. You do want to eventually move them over to the exclusive buyer agency agreement, which is going to ensure that you get paid, which again is reasonable. You should be paid for your services, and most reasonable buyers would understand that. If you have questions about this form, I'm happy to discuss it. And again, this is another great topic to continue having internally with our weekly calls to see how buyers are using it, or how agents are using it, and what kind of feedback and response they're getting from buyers as we get further along in this post-settlement world. But make sure at a minimum you have read through this document so that you can begin to digest the differences between this and the exclusive buyer agency agreement. If you have questions, as always, I'm just a phone call away. Take care.